Hello and welcome to the IT Lab, where we build and test IT solutions. Today we'll be building a kiosk machine. The plan of this lab is to secure and lock down customer-facing computers, deploy automatically with Autopilot, and manage in Intune. Let's take a look at the overview. Firstly, let's look at the technologies that we'll be using in this lab. Windows Autopilot is used to automate the setup of Windows. A self-deploying Autopilot profile is used to set up this process without any end-user interaction. Microsoft Intune is a device management solution, and it uses profiles to configure the device. An Intune kiosk profile supports single app and multi-app profiles. We'll be using a single app profile for this lab. The device that we'll use to deploy this profile to will need to support TPM 2.0. The purpose of this lab is to show how we can automate the setup of this kiosk device using Microsoft tools. A kiosk device is one that prevents end users from performing unauthorized actions or using unauthorized applications. Examples of kiosk devices are in stores, in hotel lobbies, and in public libraries. The scope of this lab is to set up a single app Microsoft Edge kiosk using Autopilot self-deploying mode. Once the kiosk is set up, only the company website should be accessible, so that means all other websites should be blocked. To test the deployment, we'll be factory resetting an existing device. The device should be plugged into a wired internet connection and then powered on. Once the device is powered on and the setup begins, Windows should deploy as a clean install. We expect that the device will be Entra-joined automatically and also auto-enrolled in Intune. Lastly, the benefits of this solution is that it's a native Intune solution. So if you already have Intune set up at your workplace, this is a low-cost solution because you can reuse the licenses. It's quite easy to set up since it's all done in Intune. It's a self-configuring solution, so it eliminates the need for lots of IT people to be doing the configuration. And also the management is quite simplified and can be centrally managed because it's all done in Intune. So let's take a look at our lab environment and some of the things that need to be in place before we start the lab. You'll need a Microsoft 365 tenant which can be purchased, or you can use an existing one if you have it, or you have the option to do a 1-month free trial from Microsoft. You'll need premium Entra licenses and Intune licenses. The lab environment I've set up here, as you can see in Entra Admin Center, it has the P2 license installed and ready to go. And I also have Intune licenses assigned to my test users here. There's also some Entra configurations that are needed. So the first one is the join setting needs to be set to all, or you can set it to selected for a selected number of people in a group. I've set it to all for this lab for simplicity. What this will do is make sure that Intune devices can be enrolled when the Autopilot deployment takes place. I've also set the company branding. So in Entra again, you can see that I've added this logo here. There are other logos, but for this deployment, this logo will show up when the Windows deployment takes place. We also need to set some things up in Intune. So in the MDM scope, we've set this to all. So this means that if a device is Entra joined, it will auto-enroll into Intune as well. And lastly, we want to make sure that the enrollment status page is configured. I'm using the default one, which is all users and all devices. And what we're looking to do is make sure that the device is blocked until all the applications are ready to go. So this means that the user won't be able to use the computer until it's fully ready. And for testing, we need a device that has Windows 10 pre-installed. So the way that Windows Autopilot works is that it relies on the Windows partition to do a clean install remotely of the device. We also need to make sure that the physical device has TPM 2.0 as previously mentioned, and we need to make sure that the device also supports TPM attestation. Lastly, the user needs to have the appropriate permissions in the Microsoft 365 tenant. Since this is a lab, I've got a user which has global administrator permissions. Okay, let's take a look at the lab steps. There's 7 in total, and the first one is to add a device to Autopilot. So with Autopilot, you need to uniquely identify the hardware that you're deploying to, since you're going to be doing this over the internet remotely. The way to do this is to get a hardware hash of the computer itself. The easiest way to do this is to take it from the computer directly. If you're doing this for many devices, it's probably a good idea to use a PowerShell script. So let's take a look at what's required. So we're going to the settings, and in here you'll see that I'm going to export your management log files. Once we export those, we'll get a compressed file of all the logs that have been downloaded. In here you'll find a file that is a CSV file that contains the hardware hash of the computer. So we need to extract it, which I'm doing right now, and you can put it anywhere on your computer, and you would then copy this onto a USB drive or something similar so that you can upload it to your computer that you're accessing the portal on. In the Intune Admin Center portal, I will then upload that CSV file so that Autopilot knows that this device exists and is ready for deployment. So within devices, I go into enrollment, and then I go into deployment profiles, or devices I should say. And you click the import button there, you select the file that you just captured, and it does take a few minutes for this to upload successfully to the portal. Once the device is imported, you'll see it's listed here. It will show your serial number. I've removed that here just for privacy. A dynamic device group is one that you can set up rules for. So devices are added and removed as per the rule that you set on the device. For Autopilot devices, you can use the group tag to target devices. So that's what we'll do next. You click on the device that was just added, and you'll get this group tag box where you can just add a tag. I've decided to call it kiosk devices. And now you can see that the group tag has been successfully added to that device. Now when I set up the dynamic group, I can use this rule here to target the group tag that we just set up. If you want more information, you can find it in the Microsoft documentation. So let's do that next. Again, in the Intune Admin Center, I go to Groups, and I set up a new group. And the key here is that it should be a security group. I can give it a name of my choosing, something that makes sense. And then the key is that the membership type should be a dynamic device. And then once I do that, it will give me the option to add a query or a rule to the device itself, sorry, to the group itself. And I'm just copying the rule that I found from the Microsoft documentation, and I'll customize it to the group tag that I set up. Okay, once that's set up, it will take a few minutes to assess that rule, and then we should find that that device appears in that group. The next step is to create the actual profile for Autopilot. Now there's two options here. You can have a user-driven or a self-deploying profile. For a user-driven profile, when Windows is setting up on the end user device, you'll get the usual questions around name and locale and language and things like that. For a self-deploying profile, it's intended to be fully automated, especially on a wired connection. So we can set up this profile that will answer those questions automatically. Let's have a look at that. We're in the Intune Admin Center again. We're going to enrollment and we're going to the deployment profiles. We'll create a new Autopilot profile for Windows PC. We'll give it a suitable name. And this is where you have the options. If I choose self-deploying, a lot of the other options are grayed out. And I'm just going to use most of the defaults, but I will also set the language. Since I'm in the UK, I'll set the language to United Kingdom. And also I will be setting the name template for this. So this is just useful because it will set the host name of the Windows device. It will also set the management name within Intune and within Intra. So I tend to use this as a good practice. Now to assign this profile, we're going to pick the group that we just set up, and we should now be able to create this profile. The next step is to create the Intune kiosk profile. Luckily, Intune has a built-in profile that can be used. We'll look at the Windows platform and we'll go to configuration profiles. Here we create a new policy. I search for kiosk and then hit create. I choose the single app full screen kiosk, and this is because we only want the user to see Microsoft Edge. We also set auto login, which means that the Windows device will log in automatically when the PC boots up and will only be able to see Microsoft Edge. For the kiosk URL, I've set this website up so that this simulates the company website, and this is the only website that should be accessible on this kiosk in the browser. So I'll paste that in there. And you can see the default browser idle time is 5 minutes, and then I click next. I'll use the dynamic device group that we created earlier. The next step is to restrict the URLs that can be browsed in the browser on the kiosk. So we create a new policy. The platform is Windows 10 again, and we're going to use the top one, which is the administrative templates. This is similar to group policy. So we need to find Microsoft Edge, and we need to find the settings that control URLs within Edge. So the one we want to look at is the block access for a list of URLs. In this case, we want to block everything, so we can use the wildcard, which is the asterisk symbol. We now want to create an exception list for the websites that should be allowed, so we can define a list of allowed URLs within the Edge browser, and we're going to enable that, and we're going to put in only the company website that should be allowed. So to recap, we've blocked all websites and we've created an exception for the company website. We will then assign this to the same group that we've been assigning to throughout this lab. And now we're ready to create this profile. Lastly, we'll need to reset the existing device that we're testing on. Normally this wouldn't be required if this was a real situation and devices had been purchased for kiosk use, because they would come straight from the supplier. But in this case, since it's a used device, we do need to reset the PC. And I'll show you how to do that quickly. So within settings, within Windows, so this is a Windows 10 machine, we can go to reset this PC and we remove everything from the device. So if you are trying this yourself, make sure you're using a device that you're happy to wipe. Once the computer restarts, it should find the enrollment status page, which is that, and you can see that the company logo is also being displayed. And now it's going to go ahead and apply the settings that we set on the Autopilot profile. So it's going to first secure the connection with Intune and make sure that the enter join and the Intune auto enroll happens. And that's now complete. The next part of this is for the Intune profiles that we set up, and you'll see it's found those two policies that we set up and will apply those automatically. This is all happening without any end user interaction, and now we should find that it restarts itself. This is the standard process for Windows to set up, and now what you'll see is that it doesn't go into a login page, it logs in automatically, and it presents the Microsoft Edge browser and it shows the URL that we set up. So this is now a kiosk device and is fully locked down. Let's take a look at the results. We were able to successfully prep the test device by generating the CSV file for the hardware hash, uploading it to Autopilot, and creating a dynamic deployment group based on the group tag that we set up. We also set up the Intune profiles, and those were picked up successfully. The deployment went without a hitch because we made sure that it had a physical TPM module on it. The Windows setup completed successfully, and we could see the company logo was displayed, and we also saw that the profiles were deployed successfully. Once the device rebooted and was in a ready state, we could see that no login was required and that the computer logged in automatically and that the Edge browser was in full screen mode. What happens in the background is that the Intune profile creates a local user that is set to auto login. And we can test some of the restrictions that are in place on the kiosk by doing some checks. So the first thing we'll do is see if we can browse to other websites like Google. Google is blocked, and this is being blocked by the Intune profile that we set up. And we'll try another website, BBC, and that's blocked as well. You'll see that there's also the end session here. So when a user is finished, they can either end the session themselves, and what that will do is clear everything out for security, and then it will just restart and go back. Or if you leave it unattended, the default timeout for this is 5 minutes. So in conclusion, I would say that the kiosk solution is easy to set up, has a quick deployment cycle, has central management capabilities in terms of the Intune portal. It reduces the amount of time that IT staff need to work on this, and therefore you have savings in terms of time and cost.